Electric Cafe.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Electric Cafe. In this video I wanted to share with you, also give you my short review on Lusine's new album called Melting Days, which comes out today, August 21st of 2026. And this comes out on Ghostly International Records, and comes on CD, vinyl, and digital as well. And this is Lusine's 10th album in total. And if you don't know Lusine, he's a Texas-born, raised American producer, also now lives in Seattle, and he's been featured on some strong labels throughout the last close to 30 years now, and I've been following him here and there throughout his career, and been always very impressed by his albums. And so when I heard about the new one coming out, I was excited to check it out, and I wanted to share my thoughts with you about it today. You know, when it comes to finding music, you have artists that are making music, you have DJs that are playing music, but for me, I've always followed labels for my entire life, ever since Factory Records, Mute Records, and all the labels that I used to follow in the 80s, and that continued through the 90s. And pre-internet, that was the best way to find artists, because I really looked at the label owner and the discography that they were curating is one that you could trust and one that you could find new music through. And so I always thought that label owners were so important. And thankfully, Lusine has placed himself on some excellent labels through the years. And it started out in the late 90s when he was on Isoflux Records, which I was following at the time. That's where I first got wind of Lusine's music. And at the time, I was following it because it had Influx, my friend, aka James Bernard, and also Greg Chin, who recorded under Strike. And just a few years ago, I released a Strike EP on my label. And so, you know, he was on Isoflux Records, and which was a strong American label. And if you were on an American label at the time, especially in the late 90s, doing more abstract and techno and IDM music, it was pretty rare, because there was not too many labels in America that was doing that. And then I followed him over to U Cover, which was another really good label that had a lot of producers on it that I found. And then he also went to Hyman Records, which had a good combination of classical music and ambient music and even some industrial music. So it was right up my alley as far as my taste. And Hyman, if you don't know, was a sub-label of Ant Zen Records. And for about 15, almost 20 years, they had a fantastic discography as well. And then around 2003, 2004, he started releasing and really found a home with Ghostly International Records. And at the time, Ghostly International Records had a really good distribution in Tower Records at the time. And when I had moved away from California to Virginia, and there wasn't too many really record stores that were, you know, featuring new electronic music, Tower Records was one of the rare ones that still carried vinyl at the time. And so, as you can see, some of the records around me today, the Spectro label was a record label that I got to know at the time, and it was a sub-label of Ghostly International. And then, of course, I also checked out a lot of Ghostly International records over the years as well, and it's been a pretty consistent label. And it ran by Matthew Deere, and this is the first Spectral record I got here, which was, I think, number 3. Lusine is a very well-respected artist. There's always a good buzz when he puts out a new album, and I can recall back in 2004 when he put the Serial Hodgepodge album, which was his first album on Ghostly International. I bought that on vinyl. It's in my record room. I couldn't necessarily find it for this video. But that album really put him on the map for me, and I followed him throughout his career. And then shortly after, just to name a few albums, A Certain Distance is definitely one I would recommend checking out. The blend of techno and also ambient music, and also more of an electronica sound, is really strong on this album. And just for a remix album for those DJs out there, the remix of Serial Hodgepodge called Pogulism is also really good. And just a couple months ago, I did my top 50 IDM artists of all time. And it's a very stacked, robust list with a lot of great producers on there. Aphex Twin, Autech, Boards of Canada, Bola, some excellent producers. And in that list, Lusine dropped in at number 18 on my favorite top 50 IDM artists of all time. And I would actually think he'd be higher if I considered him an IDM artist. There was a point in his career, probably through the first albums, through Isoflux, through You Cover, and maybe the first album on, again, Serial Hodgepodge, where he was maybe considered an IDM artist. But over the last 10 or 15 years, I consider him a lot more than, just an IDM artist. So if he was just doing IDM artists, I'm sure he'd be even higher on that list. But still, just to have a period of like 5 or 7 years where I considered him more IDM, and maybe 4 or 5 albums in that style, it's still really high on the list. And that just shows you how much I respect his music. One thing of note is this album is mastered by Raphael Anton Iris Ari, who's a strong producer in his own right, and does a lot of ambient music under labels like Room 40 and A Strange Isolated Place, also Diest Record. And for an ambient producer to master an album, I think is a great idea, because I feel like ambient producers really respect space and volumes and just the overall sound of an album like this. So I think it's a perfect choice for somebody with that kind of experience and producing background to master this album is fantastic, and it definitely shows on the album. Melting Days features 10 tracks in total, 2 singles, one in Pendulum and also Bird's Eye. And I always like when producers release singles. I think it puts extra emphasis on those tracks, and for them, in their own opinion, it's a way to share the album and maybe highlight a couple tracks that they feel really represent how they feel about the album in total. And I'm such a big fan of singles in general. I wish more artists would do this, because I think it creates different avenues for other side projects, B-sides and remixes, and other people to do different versions, and additional releases that you can collect from the artist and check out additional ways. So I hope in the future that more electronic producers will create singles off albums like this. It starts out with the first one called Sightline, which is an attention-grabbing intro and really sets up the album for a lot of anticipation after you start listening to that track. Track 2 is called Bird's Eye, and this is again one of the singles on it. And there's some beautiful tones on this track especially, and definitely has a cinematic beauty to it that I really enjoy. And then track 3, called Apparition, is my favorite track on the album. And one thing I really like about Lusine is he doesn't always start tracks by adding sound and then layering them on top of each other. In this particular track, 30 seconds in, and you're already totally immersed in the sound. And this is so dreamlike, and it reminds me of the time when I go back to some of the prime IDM days of like 2000, 2001, 2002. And it reminds me of stuff like by Wolfgang Voigt, like by Gas, and also Taylor Dupree, Shuttle 358, aka Dan Abrams, Marcus Gunter, Mitchell Akiyama, Ulf Lohman. Those are some of my favorite IDM albums. Like, those are producers that did really great albums under the IDM sound in this particular vein. Like, it's so cinematic and it feels so dreamlike, and it almost feels like you're revisiting old memories when you listen to music like this. It's very reflective, and it's just a beautiful track, and I love the tones on it. And in this style of IDM, and sort of that perfect marriage of IDM and old style glitch ambient, this is perfection. Track number 5, called Overlook, is one of my top 3 favorite tracks on the album. The bass notes in this track are awesome, and I wish more electronic producers in this vein would do more focus on lower frequencies. I feel like such a missed opportunity when you listen to electronic music, just because it's ambient or it's more atmospheric or field recording doesn't mean that it's without the lower end frequencies. And it's funny, when you listen to this album, you still think there's a lot of rhythm to the tracks, but then when you look back and you actually listen for beats, there's not too many tracks that actually have a beat. Maybe about half of them do, but there's like the essence of rhythm in almost every track. The way Overlook just dissolves into this vast cloud of dense echo, and then the underlying main melody still is remaining. It's just a brilliant example of sound design from Lusine. Rounding out my top 3 tracks is track number 7 called All Clear. Beautiful track, very memorable, and then it ends with another fantastic track, number 10, called Uncharted. And this ends the album so triumphantly for me, and just leaves a lasting impression that you definitely want to revisit this album more and more. These are the kind of albums that you can not only relax to, but you can think to and be very reflective about. It's all about the tones and textures. The sound design and the strategies of the sound done by Lusine are excellent. And through the first couple listens, it definitely stands out, the sound design on this album. And I'm sure with multiple listens through, the emotional part will sink in more and more as I revisit the album. A wonderful album and a perfect length to enjoy in one listen. I think it's pushing about 35 minutes, close to 40, somewhere in there. So not too long, not too short, just a very well balanced, well constructed, and cohesive album. I will put a link down below where you can check out the album and listen. I highly recommend you check out this album. I give it a score of 79 out of 100. On the high side of very good, almost to excellent. A very, very strong score in a first couple listens through. And, once it sinks in and over time and, 5, 10, 15 years, I think this album could easily squeak into the 80s and be what I would consider an excellent album and a genre classic, because this has all the elements. And as it becomes more memorable with more listens, I'm sure that part will become even better with the nostalgia of it and revisiting it like the memories that it sounds like it gives me. If you'd like me to review an album for the future, if you'd like me to review an album for a future video, my email is down below in the notes section, as well as how I rate albums and songs, if you'd like to take a look at that. And I really appreciate your time, and we'll see you on the next video.